He thought his billions could get him anything, anyone. But she wasn't buying. And what happened next shocked him and everyone who knew him. Welcome to Prime Tale, where true stories of love, power, and unexpected twists unfold. Subscribe to Prime Tale for more story. Today, we bring you a story that proves money can't buy respect or the heart of the right person. Stay tuned, because this one will leave you speechless. Jason had it all. The kind of life most people only dreamed about, the kind of life most people would kill for or at least bend over backward to kiss up to. His name carried weight in every corner of the city: Jason Blackwood, billionaire, entrepreneur, and the man who could bend people, situations, and even laws to his will. In the glittering towers of downtown, he moved like a king, exuding confidence, power, and the subtle arrogance that only comes from knowing the world is yours to command. Every morning began the same: a sleek black Rolls-Royce waiting at the curb, a carefully tailored suit that screamed perfection, a briefcase filled with documents worth more than the average person made in a lifetime. To Jason, money wasn't just a tool, it was validation, proof that he was untouchable. But little did he know that life was about to hand him a lesson money couldn't buy. That morning, he wandered into his usual cafe, the one with the high ceilings, polished wood counters, and the faint aroma of roasted coffee beans that reminded him of power, stability, and wealth. But something, or rather, someone stopped him in his tracks. She was standing at the counter, waiting for her order. Nothing about her screamed wealth. Her clothes were simple, her hair tied in a loose ponytail, and her hands bore the faint traces of hard work, small calluses, evidence of someone who labored for her living. Yet her eyes carried a quiet strength that instantly drew him in. She had a presence that didn't bow to the world around her. "Coffee, black, and make it strong," she said, voice calm but assertive. Jason, used to attention, assumed she would flinch, smile, or at least blush at the sight of a man like him. But she didn't. Curiosity sparked, Jason approached. "You don't have to struggle with that," he said, offering a charming smile and a neatly folded bill larger than most monthly salaries. "Allow me." She looked at him, studied him, and then laughed. Not politely. Not in the soft, accommodating way he was used to. It was a deep, genuine laugh full of amusement, disbelief, and defiance. Jason froze, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, a flash of confusion and shock. No one laughed at him like that. Ever. "I don't need your money," she said simply, her eyes locking onto his. "I work hard for my life. I don't take shortcuts." Her words were a slap. Jason, who had grown up in boardrooms and palatial estates where his will was law, didn't know what to do. He had spent decades mastering the art of influence, persuasion, and buying loyalty, but none of that applied here. She wasn't impressed. She wasn't intimidated. She wasn't afraid. And that was intoxicating. Jason's arrogance gave way to a strange curiosity. Who was she? Why was she different from every other person he'd ever encountered? Why did she make him feel small? Over the next few days, Jason watched her from a distance, occasionally sending little gestures, flowers delivered to her small office, invitations to high-end events, even a new tablet to make her work easier. Each time, she rejected him. Not rudely, not cruelly, but with a calm, unwavering refusal. This was new. This was unfamiliar. This was frustrating. Yet the more she resisted, the more Jason wanted to understand her. The more he wanted to break down her walls. The more he wanted to prove to himself and maybe to the world that his money could still conquer anything. But there was a shift happening he didn't understand. With every refusal, a strange feeling gnawed at him, a mixture of admiration, irritation, and an unshakable realization: maybe, just maybe, this time, money wasn't enough. As he drove away that evening, staring at the city skyline shimmering in gold and silver, he whispered to himself, "I've never met anyone like her. And I'm going to find out why she can't be bought." And that, dear viewer, is where our story begins, a tale of power, pride, and the shocking lesson that would soon shatter Jason's world. Jason couldn't stop thinking about her. Every detail, every laugh, every defiant glance that refused to bow to his wealth. Normally, he had no problem getting what or who he wanted. One phone call, one check, one invitation, and people bent over backward to say yes. But Sarah, she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. The next morning, he decided to escalate his approach. After all, billions of dollars weren't just for showing off, they were tools, weapons, ways to make the impossible happen. He called his assistant, a sharp, impeccably dressed woman named Claudia, and instructed. Set up a meeting. No ordinary lunch. I want her in the Ritz, VIP room, a private table. Full catering. Everything she could ever want. And make sure there's no pressure, just an invitation she can't refuse. Claudia raised an eyebrow, knowing Jason's history. She's not like your usual targets, sir. She might refuse. Jason smirked. Then I'll make her reconsider. Hours later, Sarah received an envelope slipped under the door of her small office. Inside was a handwritten invitation, join me for lunch. No expectations, only a conversation. Jason Blackwood. She looked at it, hesitated for a moment, and then smiled softly. She wasn't used to billionaires showing up on her doorstep, or inviting her to anything. But she didn't feel impressed. She felt amused. That afternoon, she arrived at the Ritz, her presence understated yet undeniable. Jason was waiting in the private room, a table set with crystal glasses, gold-rimmed plates, and a selection of the finest cuisine money could buy. The kind of lunch that made ordinary people's jaws drop. He stood up, extending a perfectly manicured hand. Sarah, thank you for coming. Sarah shook his hand but didn't smile. I came out of curiosity, she said. Not because I'm impressed. Jason's smirk widened. Good. I like honesty. For the next hour, he tried everything he had in his arsenal. He spoke about his philanthropic work, casually mentioning his donations to hospitals, schools, and charities. He offered to fund any project she cared about. He even tried subtle charm compliments that usually left women enchanted. Sarah listened patiently, sipping her water. Occasionally, she shook her head, politely but firmly refusing his offers. You're trying to buy my attention, she said finally. And that won't work. Not because I'm stubborn, but because money can't buy respect or integrity. Jason felt a flicker of irritation. He was used to admiration, not resistance. He was used to people saying yes, not laughing him off. But more than irritation, a strange feeling crept in: admiration. He had never encountered someone so unyielding, someone who stood her ground with such quiet power. He leaned back, studying her face. She wasn't just beautiful, she was radiant in her independence. Every gesture, every word, carried confidence that no amount of luxury could overshadow. And then, just when he thought he had her figured out, Sarah did something unexpected. She leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but firm. Mr. Blackwood, I'm not interested in what you can give me. I'm interested in what I can achieve on my own. I don't need a billionaire to define me. I don't need anyone to solve my problems. The word struck Jason harder than any insult ever could. She wasn't rejecting him out of fear or pride. She was rejecting the idea that he could control her life or anyone else's with money. Jason realized something in that moment: this wasn't about winning her affection. It wasn't about impressing her with wealth or status. This was about something far more complex, something money could never touch. That evening, Jason returned to his penthouse, staring at the city below, lights twinkling like scattered diamonds. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, swirling it slowly, thinking about her words. He had spent his entire life believing that money equaled influence, that wealth could open any door, and that people were ultimately swayed by power. Yet Sarah had shattered that illusion in a single conversation. She was proof that some things, respect, integrity, self-worth, could not be bought. He was intrigued. He was frustrated. And more than anything, he was curious. Over the next few days, Jason tried subtler tactics. He sent anonymous gifts, not expensive ones, just thoughtful gestures. A book she had mentioned wanting, flowers from a local market, a donation to her favorite charity, quietly made in her name. Each time, Sarah appreciated the thought but remained unmoved by his underlying intent. Jason began to question himself. For the first time in decades, he wasn't sure if he could win. Not with money, not with charm, not with power. She wasn't a challenge to overcome, she was a mirror reflecting the emptiness of everything he had built around himself. Then came the moment that would push him further. While walking past her shop one evening, Jason noticed Sarah helping a man sitting on the curb, holding a tattered blanket. She handed him a sandwich, a cup of tea, and a few coins. No audience. No cameras. Just kindness. Jason felt something he hadn't felt in years: shock. He had always believed he could measure life in numbers, dollars, deals, investments. And yet here was Sarah, rich in ways his money had never been able to buy: generosity, courage, authenticity. He realized that the real battle wasn't about winning her over. It was about understanding her, and perhaps, understanding himself. That night, he stared at the ceiling of his penthouse, a $1 million chandelier casting reflections on the walls. He whispered to himself, almost aloud. Who is she, really? Jason had always lived life in numbers. Every success measured by digits on a screen, every relationship evaluated through influence, every encounter filtered through the lens of wealth. He had never been blindsided. He had never been humbled. Until Sarah. For days, he had tried to unravel the enigma she represented. Invitations, gifts, subtle gestures, all rejected, all politely, confidently, unwaveringly refused. Normally, resistance faded under the weight of his billions, but Sarah's defiance wasn't the kind that could be intimidated, bought, or cajoled. And that fascinated him. One chilly evening, driven by a mix of frustration and curiosity, Jason parked his black Rolls-Royce a block away from her shop. He didn't want to intrude, at least not yet, but he needed to see the world she inhabited, the life she built without his money. Through the large glass window, he watched. Sarah knelt beside a man sitting on the curb, a tattered blanket wrapped around his shoulders. His hands shook slightly as she handed him a warm sandwich and a cup of tea. She didn't speak much, only offered him a gentle smile and a few comforting words. Jason watched, frozen. The moment was simple. Ordinary. Yet it carried more gravity than any of the business deals, press conferences, or charity galas he had ever orchestrated. In that instant, Jason felt something he hadn't felt in years: humility. He had grown up believing that influence, power, and wealth were the ultimate measures of success. He had built a life where his decisions shaped markets, his words moved crowds, and his money opened doors no one else could approach. Yet here was Sarah, untouched by wealth, untouched by influence, untouched by anything he could offer, demonstrating a kind of power he had never known existed. He wanted to step inside and offer her help. Maybe give her money. Maybe impress her. But he stopped himself. Not because he was afraid Jason had never been afraid, but because he realized that what she valued couldn't be bought. It couldn't be forced. It couldn't be manipulated. And then came the realization that shook him to his core: she was rich, in ways he could never attain. Rich in empathy, integrity, and heart. Her world operated on principles he had never considered. For the first time, he questioned everything he had built his life upon. Jason retreated to a nearby cafe, ordered a whiskey, and let the truth settle in. He thought about the moments he had spent flaunting his wealth, the relationships built on convenience rather than respect, the influence wielded for control rather than purpose. Everything felt hollow. For decades, he had believed he was untouchable. That his money and status made him untouchable. That he could achieve anything he desired. But Sarah had disproved that belief with a single act of kindness. It wasn't just defiance. It was a mirror reflecting his own inadequacies. It was a revelation that his world, despite its glittering surface, was empty where it mattered most. He had wealth beyond imagination but lacked the depth of character, the connection, and the authenticity that Sarah possessed effortlessly. Jason couldn't sleep that night. His penthouse, usually a sanctuary, felt like a cage. He stared at the skyline, the lights of the city glittering like shards of a life he had misunderstood. He realized that no amount of money could buy what he most desired now: understanding, genuine connection, and the kind of respect that Sarah embodied. Days passed, and he became a different observer. He watched her shop, her community, her interactions with people who depended on her guidance, her small acts of kindness. Every time she helped someone, Jason felt a pang of guilt mixed with admiration. He realized that all the donations, all the charity galas he hosted, were attempts to buy a legacy, but they lacked the sincerity he now saw in her every gesture. It was during one of these quiet observations that he overheard her speaking to a volunteer. Money is fleeting, influence is temporary, but the choices we make every day, how we treat others, how we show kindness, those are the things that matter. Jason's heart raced. These weren't mere words, they were a philosophy, a code she lived by. And it was a code that rendered him powerless, despite all his wealth. He understood now: the real challenge wasn't to win her over with gifts, dinners, or power. The real challenge was to become a man who deserved her respect. A man who understood that life wasn't about buying admiration but earning it through character, humility, and authenticity. The shock was profound. Jason, a man who had never been denied, had finally met someone who couldn't be swayed. Not by charm, not by money, not by influence. Someone who held a mirror to his life and exposed its emptiness. And that's when he knew if he wanted to win her trust, if he wanted to even begin understanding her world, he would have to confront himself. He would have to question every belief, every choice, every assumption that had guided him until now. For the first time in his life, Jason was humbled. And for the first time, he felt the stirrings of true transformation. The days following the shocking revelation outside Sarah's shop left Jason restless. Sleep eluded him. His penthouse, once a sanctuary of power, had become a cage of reflection and doubt. He had prided himself on knowing what people wanted, on shaping situations to his advantage, on acquiring respect and admiration without truly earning it. But Sarah had unraveled all of that in a single, ordinary act of kindness. Jason's mind replayed the scene endlessly: the man on the curb, shivering under a tattered blanket, the warm sandwich in Sarah's hands, the gentle reassurance in her voice. No cameras. No audience. No pressure. Just pure, unadulterated generosity. And in that simplicity, she had stripped away his illusions of power. He realized, with a weighty clarity, that if he wanted to understand her, if he wanted to even hope of earning her trust, he had to approach life differently. Not with money. Not with influence. Not with charm. But with action, humility, and real effort. The next morning, Jason did something unprecedented: he called Sarah. "I want to help," he said, his tone uncharacteristically tentative. "Not with money. Not with gifts. Not with influence. I want to do it the right way." There was silence on the line, and then, softly, Sarah replied. "Are you ready to prove it, or are you just saying what sounds good?" Jason swallowed, feeling a pang of humility. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. He had spent a lifetime wielding wealth as a shield and a sword. Now, he would have to wield nothing but his own effort. Sarah set the terms: a local community project that had been struggling for months. It wasn't glamorous. There would be no press releases, no recognition, no awards. Just sweat, persistence, and genuine commitment. Jason was to volunteer, organize, and support the project, not as a billionaire, not as a figurehead, but as a team member who had to earn respect through action. At first, Jason floundered. The project involved renovating a small community center, coordinating volunteers, and helping at-risk youth with mentorship programs. These were tasks he had never done, tasks he had previously thought beneath him. Lifting boxes, organizing schedules, even cleaning tables felt alien. He was accustomed to delegating, not doing. But Sarah's eyes followed him, calm yet observant, silently holding him accountable. He realized quickly that this was more than a test, it was a mirror. Every task, every challenge, reflected the man he had been and the man he could become. And it terrified him. But slowly, Jason began to change. The first time he helped a child paint a mural on the community center's wall, he felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced in boardrooms or yachts. The first time he stayed late to organize donations and paperwork, he noticed something profound: effort mattered more than outcome, and sincerity mattered more than wealth. The emotional tension grew each day. Jason's ego struggled against the humility this work demanded. There were moments when he wanted to quit, moments when he felt the familiar pull of arrogance, the temptation to solve problems with a check or a shortcut. But Sarah's quiet insistence kept him grounded. "You can't buy the heart of this community," she told him one evening as they sorted supplies. "You have to earn it, one choice at a time." Jason nodded, absorbing the lesson. Every refusal he had faced from Sarah, every moment of resistance, had prepared him for this. He was learning that leadership wasn't about dominance or control, it was about trust, patience, and genuine action. And then came the moment that shocked him the most. One of the children, a shy boy named Lucas, approached Jason after a long day of cleaning and organizing. "Why are you helping us?" Lucas asked, eyes wide. Jason paused, unsure how to answer. He had never been asked such a question with such innocence and sincerity. Because it's the right thing to do," he finally said, realizing that the words held more weight than any donation he had ever made. The boy smiled and ran off, leaving Jason standing there, heart pounding. He realized that this was the kind of impact that money could never buy. The kind of respect and trust that came from effort, care, and humility. Over the following weeks, Jason threw himself into the project completely. He organized volunteers, fixed broken furniture, taught workshops, and even stayed late to mentor the children. With each passing day, he felt himself transforming. He was no longer the man who believed money equaled power. He was learning that true strength lay in service, empathy, and integrity. And yet, the ultimate test was yet to come. Sarah, who had been quietly observing his transformation, was preparing to confront him with a challenge that would determine whether he had truly changed or whether he was still clinging to illusions of control and wealth. Jason had changed, but he didn't yet know if it was enough. Jason had been working tirelessly for weeks. He had cleaned floors, organized schedules, mentored children, and coordinated volunteers. Each task chipped away at the man he once was, the billionaire who believed wealth alone could solve any problem. Yet, despite all his effort, he knew that Sarah's final judgment awaited. Her challenge was simple in words, yet monumental in meaning: succeed without shortcuts, without relying on wealth, without seeking admiration, and without pretending to be someone he wasn't. The first day of the ultimate test began at dawn. Jason arrived early, the cool morning air biting at his skin, carrying with it the scent of fresh paint and sawdust. Volunteers had already gathered, waiting for instructions. Jason's heart pounded. He wasn't here as a billionaire. He wasn't here as a powerful man who could buy loyalty. He was here as a participant, equal to everyone else, judged by effort alone. Sarah appeared shortly after, her presence commanding yet gentle. She didn't offer encouragement or praise. She simply observed, letting Jason navigate the chaos he had helped organize. The project that day was repairing the building's roof. Tiles had fallen, leaks had formed, and every corner of the structure bore signs of neglect. Jason's first instinct was to delegate, hire professionals, pay someone, make it disappear. But Sarah shook her head. "No shortcuts," she said. "Do it yourself. Led by example, not by money." Jason swallowed, nodding, feeling a tight knot of tension in his chest. The work was grueling. He lifted heavy tiles, balanced precariously on ladders, and navigated narrow beams, all while coordinating volunteers who looked to him for guidance. Sweat dripped down his forehead, his hands ached, and for the first time in decades, he felt vulnerable, human, and unshielded by wealth. Hours passed. Volunteers took breaks, children played in the courtyard, and Jason continued, driven by a mix of determination and fear. Fear not of failure, but of failing in front of Sarah. Every glance from her eyes, calm yet piercing, reminded him that this wasn't about impressing anyone with money. This was about earning respect through effort, integrity, and sincerity. As the sun reached its zenith, a sudden crisis struck. A section of the scaffolding wobbled dangerously, threatening to collapse. Volunteers froze. Children screamed. Jason's instincts kicked in not to call for security, not to buy a solution, but to act. He ran toward the unstable section, gripping the beam, steadying it with every ounce of strength he had. "Everyone back," he shouted, his voice commanding yet infused with genuine concern. The volunteers obeyed immediately, trusting his leadership not because of his status, but because of his actions. With a combination of strength, quick thinking, and teamwork, Jason stabilized the structure. The crisis was averted, but he was exhausted, every muscle screaming in protest. He looked up at the roof, and for the first time, he felt a deep satisfaction, not pride in wealth, but pride in effort and collaboration. Later, Sarah approached. She didn't congratulate him. She didn't smile. She simply said, "You handled the crisis well. But this is only part of the test." Jason's pulse quickened. He had proven himself in action, but could he sustain this? Could he maintain humility, patience, and genuine leadership without reverting to arrogance or relying on money? The next challenge came in an unexpected form. A local journalist arrived to cover the community project. Normally, Jason would have arranged a press release, orchestrated the perfect photo op, and ensured his name was front and center. But Sarah gave him explicit instructions: no publicity, no recognition. Jason felt the tension spike. Every fiber of his being resisted. He had spent decades seeking acknowledgement, thriving on admiration and controlling narratives. Yet, he followed her instructions. He spoke only when necessary, lifted where needed, mentored where possible, and let the volunteers, the children, and the project itself take the spotlight. By evening, Jason was exhausted, sunburned, bruised, and emotionally raw. He had faced physical challenges, moral tests, and internal battles. But he had survived. More than that, he had grown. The billionaire who once believed he could buy anything now understood the value of effort, character, and humility. As the day closed, Sarah gathered the volunteers. Jason stood quietly, hands on his hips, watching her address the group. Then she turned to him. "You've changed," she said simply, voice calm but firm. "Not because you wanted to impress me. Not because you needed approval. But because you faced yourself and chose to do the right thing, even when it was hard." Jason exhaled, relief and awe mingling in his chest. For the first time, he felt seen, not for his wealth, not for his power, but for his character. The final twist, however, was yet to come. Just as he began to relax, Sarah handed him a letter. A handwritten note from Lucas, the shy boy he had mentored weeks before. "Thank you for helping us. You didn't have to, but you did. You're not just rich, you're brave, kind, and real. We believe in you." Jason's eyes welled with tears. He realized then that the greatest currency in life wasn't money, influence, or luxury. It was respect, trust, and genuine impact. And he had finally earned it, not by purchasing it, but by becoming worthy of it. The weeks following Jason's ultimate test had changed him profoundly. No longer the untouchable billionaire who relied solely on wealth and influence, he had become a man defined by action, integrity, and humility. Yet he knew that transformation was not a moment, it was a journey. And the final step of that journey awaited him. Sarah had orchestrated an event to celebrate the completion of the community center renovations, a modest gathering, devoid of media, luxury, or fanfare. The children had decorated the space with handmade banners, the volunteers had baked cakes, and the local residents had come together to witness the fruits of their collective effort. Jason arrived early, carrying supplies, helping set up tables, and greeting volunteers by name. The difference was striking. He no longer needed recognition, his satisfaction came from participation, from being part of something meaningful. Every smile, every laugh, every nod of gratitude grounded him in the reality that true fulfillment comes from giving, not taking. Sarah approached him quietly, her presence calm yet commanding. "Today," she said, "is about the community, not you. Remember that." Jason nodded, fully understanding. This wasn't about a show, about accolades, or about proving himself to her, or anyone. It was about legacy, impact, and authenticity. The celebration began. Children ran through the freshly painted halls, volunteers shared stories of their hard work, and residents expressed gratitude for a space that would become a sanctuary for learning, growth, and hope. Jason moved among them, assisting, listening, and encouraging. He had shed his former persona, and in doing so, discovered the joy of genuine connection. But the final revelation came unexpectedly. Lucas, the shy boy who had first approached Jason weeks ago, stepped forward with a small, carefully wrapped box. "This is for you," he said softly. Jason opened it to find a handmade card, scrawled in childish handwriting but filled with profound meaning. "You didn't have to be here. You didn't have to care. But you did. You showed us that even someone with everything can choose to be humble, kind, and real. Thank you for being more than money." Jason felt his chest tighten. For the first time, he realized that wealth, fame, and power were transient, but the impact he could have on people's lives, no matter how small, was enduring. He understood that money could never buy this, the connection, the respect, the gratitude. As he stood there, absorbing the moment, Sarah approached. There was no judgment in her eyes, only acknowledgement. She smiled faintly. "You've learned," she said. "Not because you wanted to impress me, but because you faced yourself." Jason exhaled, a mixture of relief, pride, and humility washing over him. The man who once believed he could buy anything had finally understood that some things, the most important things, cannot be purchased. Yet there was one last lesson. As the evening drew to a close, a local reporter approached, attempting to cover the event. Jason had a choice: allow his name to be highlighted, parade his wealth and influence, or let the story focus on the people and the community. Without hesitation, Jason stepped back. "This is not about me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It's about the kids, the volunteers, and the community. They are the story." It was a small act in the grand scheme, but to Jason, it represented a monumental shift. He had chosen humility over ego, service over recognition, and authenticity over power. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the newly renovated center, Jason felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced his own flaws, challenged his assumptions, and emerged not only as a better man but as someone who understood the true meaning of value, success, and respect.